But I want to welcome everyone to BC Prior Learning Action Network's conference, or sorry, webinar. And I'm really excited about what's going to be shared today for a few different reasons. When I first heard about the work that Humber was doing on digital fluency, the digital fluency project, and that was way back, like I think in August of this last year, and I was instantly impressed by the innovation and the understanding of the labor market needs and the importance of working with industry. And so we've had talks on and off. I was curious about what they're doing, how they're doing it, and what the impact has been. And so I'm really excited today to share what they've been working on and let them, of course, talk about it. So just a few housekeeping things before we start. We're going to keep things pretty informal. So if you have a question, put it in the chat and I will monitor that as we go through. Sarah and Frank, that way you guys don't have to monitor it while you're doing your presentation. You've probably noticed we are recording this session and we'll make that available on the website at a future date. Frank confirmed we will be able to share the PowerPoint, so we'll share that to the participants as well. And we don't see Andrew here yet, but Andrew works with BC Plan extensively, and he was really helpful, instrumental in putting all of this together with Sarah and Frank. So before we begin, I see, Frank, that you have a land acknowledgement, and I'm just going to share a land acknowledgement from where I am today. I'll say WIC, which is hello to many people. And I am here today on Turtle Island, as all of you are, and we come from various places across the province and across the country. And I think I've seen a couple of people in different countries today. We are all here on Mother Earth, and we have the honor and privilege to learn, work, and play. And for me, the land acknowledgement is really important. It's to understand the longstanding history that has brought us to reside on this land and in these territories, and to seek to understand our place in this history. And as many of you know, prior learning assessment really has its roots in Indigenous ways of knowing and assessing. And so I feel quite honored to be able to host this today from the Kamloops Dishwapnik Nation. My name is Susan Fursell, and I am the chair of the BC Plan, BC Prior Learning Action Network, as well as the director of prior learning PLAR at Thompson Rivers University in Kamloops, BC. And with joining us today, we have Sarah Peak, and she's the Associate Dean of Flexible Learning at Humber. I just love that title, Flexible Learning. It's just like, I understand that's a new position, right? Yeah. Okay. So it's just a sign of Humber's innovation and understanding of the future. And Sarah's also a member of Humber's Center for Innovation and Learning, and I know we work with them really closely as well. So that expertise you have is probably very valued. And Sarah, I don't think we've talked about this before, but I grew up in Williams Lake, and so we were neighbors in Vanderhoof. So I know many people from Vanderhoof where you grew up, so it's a small world we live in.
That's great.
Sarah holds a Master's of Arts in Higher Education Administration and Leadership from Royal Roads, and is a curious lifelong learner, and what a skill set you need today. So Frank and I met probably, about 6 months ago. Hey, Frank. And Frank holds a Master's of Science in Medical Science and is passionate working with and for youth. So he's previously worked as a project coordinator for the digital fluency for the workplace. So this project that they're going to share much more information on about. And really, I think Frank played a big role in pulling that interdisciplinary team together. So looking at the educators, the workforce developers, community members, industry partners, such an important combination of people and voices to hear. And Frank, I remember our first conversation, you talked about your executive director role with Inspire. You led a nonprofit that empowers the next generation of young leaders by providing a platform for youth to share ideas, thoughts, and perspectives. And I thought that's just really want to mention that today because that's such a needed such a needed piece today. And so thank you for doing that work. Those of you who were on a little bit early probably heard a few of us were at the Future Skills Summit. And it was interesting because one of the comments made at the summit was we really need to reimagine how we support working adults. And I thought that was so timely considering the webinar that Sarah and Frank are going to share today. This is all about being innovative, about understanding the needs, the changes in the labor market. It's about recognizing the role of not digital literacy, but digital fluency, and how that can blend with micro-credentials and, of course, prior learning assessment. And I'm really looking forward to learning more about the lessons that you've learned, how you've done this, kind of the support that you garnered and whatnot. So like I said, I'm going to hand the floor over and we're going to keep it informal. Please put your questions in the chat. We have 26 participants today, so I think we'll be able to manage the questions. Sarah and Frank are going to do a presentation, and then we're going to open it up for questions and answers. And I promise we'll all be done and ready to go back to our work or end our day in about 50 minutes. So that's enough of me talking. I'm going to hand the floor over to Sarah and Frank. And Andrew, if you're there, I'm going to give you co-host.
Superpower.
Ooh, that sounds like a powerful word. Okay. Enough of me. I'm going to mute my mic now.
Thank you so much. And thank you to everyone who's taken some time to participate in this webinar. One of the things that we learn from each other, or one of the things that we hope to gain is the kinds of things that we can learn from each other by sharing this sort of a presentation. So we will try to zip through the slide deck and get to the questions and get to a conversation with you about the experience that we've had in this project, and hopefully hear back from you some of the experiences that you've had in some other similar opportunities. You've shared an excellent acknowledgement of the land, and we just similarly here in each of our places just recognize the first inhabitants who we honor today, and just invite you to think about the place that you are and your connections with the land and our connections together, just as we flip over to the slide with our agenda on it. So we're going to talk about a number of things. I'm going to talk briefly about microcredentials at Humber to kind of put this into some perspective, to explain why this project is a strategic project at Humber. Frank is going to speak to the Digital Fluency Project more specifically. And I just want to be clear that while I have been working on the microcredentials framework, Frank and the team, and there are others who are part of the team, one key person who is on a parental leave right now, there have been so many people who have been involved in this project, and I'm certainly not going to speak for the tremendous work that they've done, but I'm going to try to plug in some of the gaps between the strategic and how this project really fits into all of the work that we do. We're going to share with you the results that we have to this point and some experience around challenges that we've faced and next steps. And then again, as I said, invite questions, as many as we can answer in a short period of time. So in terms of microcredentials at Humber, our microcredential framework really aligns very closely with some of the other microcredential frameworks that I think are very familiar to many. For anyone who's in Ontario, eCampus Ontario is one of the leading frameworks, and CICAN is another, and HECO has recently published some definitions and so on. And I think that the fact that we've had to develop our individual frameworks speaks to the fact that there isn't a consistent definition of frameworks, but at Humber we found it quite helpful to think about the descriptors of microcredentials and use those descriptors to try to make them as transparent and as plain for, especially for our industry partners and our earners to understand what they mean. At Humber, we refer to microcredentials that mean something, and really it's putting the earner at the center and the industry partner together with them, and then building the microcredential around their needs. And so the features of our microcredentials that are really of focus are the fact that they're competency-based, they are industry endorsed, there is an assessment component in every microcredential, and wherever possible, they are PLAR-based. And I'll talk a little bit more about what we mean by PLAR-based in just a moment. But it was these features of microcredentials that we really wanted to, we had been doing a lot of thoughtfulness around and theoretical framework development, but we wanted to test this theoretical framework, and the DFW project was an opportunity to do that. PLAR has been a significant component of our microcredential framework right from the very beginning. And that's in part because PLAR and other forms of recognition of prior learning transfer and other access points are central pillars in Humber's strategy and in our context. And so it was important for us to include PLAR in the development of our framework. And I'll say that a lot of the thought that we had initially in terms of our development was in connection with partners in New Zealand at Otago Polytechnic, and later with VIA University College in Denmark, in what we refer to at Humber as the Global Polytechnic Alliance. Really a link between institutions that are similar-minded, and we were following a model of what I call PLAR-based microcredentials that were able to certify learning that came from non-traditional sources. I think most of us on this call and others who've had time to think about or deliver microcredentials are probably most familiar with short course microcredentials. That's what I call the style that we see most frequently, where there is a micro-learning of some sort and an assessment, and then a microcredential is awarded at the end of that. And then the third type at Humber that we offer, we call embedded microcredentials. Those microcredentials certify content that is already a part of an existing post-secondary course or program. And all three of those microcredential types have as a common denominator the fact that we are spotlighting, especially for employers, the usefulness and the visibility of a particular competency or skill. And certainly a PLAR-based microcredential is one of the most understandable ways for some of our corporate partners to have understood microcredentials and to understand and appreciate the value of an approach of microcredentials. Right, do you want to go to the next slide?
Sure. Yeah, thanks again, Susan, for the introduction before. Just wanted to start off with mentioning that I'm also an immigrant settler and was born and raised in the Philippines. So just wanted to acknowledge that before I start off in my presentation. So basically, for the digital fluency for the workforce, it is a research project. And our main goal was to develop a series of stackable digital fluency microcredentials to better equip underserved individuals, one, to transition to and within the workforce. And then second one is to provide employers the ability to recruit and retain digitally fluent workers. So one of the things that we found out during our consultations and with industry and community partners is that there is a lack of pool of workers that are digitally fluent that they can potentially hire in a timely manner. So that is something that we wanted to pursue in this project. The other things that we wanted to incorporate in the research is the PLAR approach that Sarah was mentioning. So one of the goals is also to investigate the effectiveness, feasibility, and scalability of implementing a Humber's PLAR approach in our microcredential strategy. And then the last one is to determine which type of delivery model, because for this project, we've actually delivered it in two ways. One is asynchronous, and then the other one is synchronous. So was there a difference between synchronous learning and asynchronous learning? in terms of, learning outcomes, were learners able to understand or learn more between synchronous versus asynchronous? So those were the three things that we were mostly interested in. And I just wanted to highlight that, there were a lot of departments and team members that were integral in creating this micro-credential at Humber. So the last time I counted, I think there were more than 40, 50 people from Humber that was involved in this project, either directly or indirectly, as part of our steering committee, our project advisory committee, as part of the curriculum development side, the project side, the stakeholder relationship side, et cetera. And then this program is hosted by one of our departments here at Humber, which is the Community Outreach and Workforce Development. So our main mandate is to be working with industry and community partners, and making sure that a lot of these underrepresented, underserved individuals are able to transition to and within the workforce. Lastly, we're not able to do this project without the support of Future Skills Center, which is provided us with pilot funding to start this project back in 2020. So I think some of the importance, which I've alluded to already before, one is, when we, like I said, when we were doing our consultations, there weren't really any, programs, micro-credential or courses that were set with a focus on foundational cross-sectoral digital fluency training. So that is, one, backed by industry partners like Sarah was alluding to or mentioning. We always try to get industry partner backing and also their consultations, because we want these micro-credentials to be beneficial to not only the learners, but also the industry partners that will potentially be hiring them in the end. We also wanted to, focus on the PLAR method. We wanted learners to start where they're at, and we don't want them to, redo the learning that they've already know based on past experiences. So that's something that is very important in terms of how we created this micro-credential. The third one is, this micro-credential is offered by Humber College, which is a recognized post-secondary institution. And we do have some results, that we'll be showing later on, that, a lot of learners do value that their micro-credential is offered by a recognized post-secondary institution. With COVID-19, this disruption in technology. This technology disruption has been, exacerbated. So a lot of the learnings from this program, our aim is to hopefully help these learners gain those digital skills so that they can fully transition. And then the last one, since this is a research project, we're hoping to, publish our work and share our work and disseminate our work so that, we contribute to a bigger national body of research around workforce development. In terms of target groups, we're hoping we have supported more than 300 individuals, primarily seeking employment. So the main groups that we supported are youth, so ages 19 to 29, newcomers within the past 5 years, racialized people, and then people with essential skills gap. So just to note on here that they don't need to meet all 4 of these categories. They just need to meet one of the 4 in order to be eligible for the program. And when we were creating this program, we had a few things that we wanted to consider and keep in mind. So one was we wanted all of the courses to be accessible in terms of AODA compliance. We actually also wanted them to be equitable and inclusive. In all of our modules, we actually created videos with persona that might represent some of the populations that we're serving, and that kickstarted that module. So in total, we have about 15 modules, and we had 15 videos that kickstarted each of those modules, so that one, it personalizes the learning process, and then two, hopefully when they see themselves represented in those videos, they're able to connect more to the learning, and they're able to say, hey, I can actually do this as well. So that's basically how we built this program, based on equitable, inclusive, and accessible learning experiences from Humber's experience in the past decades, and also from our current experience in developing the digital fluency for the workforce.
Equity is a significant issue, even just as we started to digest what digital fluency meant. And we wanted to share this slide in particular because it speaks to the fact that digital fluency is an equity issue right from the start. We recognized very, very quickly that individuals required access to devices that I think that we thought, and certainly some of our employers thought, was more readily accessible. And we were a little surprised by the degree or the lack of access. And then coupled with that lack of access to the internet. And as we then went into the pandemic, we certainly, we experienced that to an even greater extent, but we were beginning to have this sense that digital fluency was by and large first an equity issue. We also began our project really defining and understanding what we meant by digital fluency. And part of our consultation with employers was to refine some of that definition, but we ended in this place saying that digital fluency is really a spectrum of related skills and competencies, and that navigating and understanding the workplace, the digitally evolving economy, the ecosystems of work, education, and life, all of those things were really tied to digital fluency. And so that was our starting point and our point of beginning. Can we go to the next slide, Frank? Because part of our framework, our micro-credential framework, is so much rooted in our employer connections, and because of the roots that community outreach and workforce development, the branch of Humber that was lead on this project, the industry advisors was a significant part of this project as well, right from the start. And so we recruited very actively from a number of different employers within the community and near the community. Andrew, I see your hand up. Is that a stop now, or
we just have a quick question. Shall we ask it now or keep it till the end?
What, is it okay if we keep them to the end?
Yeah.
Thanks. That's great. I mean, unless it's something like super relevant to the slide, but that's okay. So we assembled this panel of industry advisors, and they took on different roles during the project. At times, some of our employers were participants in our advisory sessions that we'll describe a little bit later. They also formed a program advisory committee similar to the program advisory committees that we use for our post-secondary programs. And we really asked them to think very much about what the role of digital was in each of their sectors, so that we could get a multi-sectoral picture of what digital fluency skills were required. Do you want to go to the next? These are just a couple of the endorsements. We won't read them, obviously, but this is describing when you do receive the deck, you can see what the response was throughout the process. Our employers could see at the very beginning of the project the benefit for them, and then they experienced it later on as they began to work through defining and experiencing digital fluency in the coursework. Slide. These also appear in our badge currently, so that the employee endorsements are visible to any of the end users or the consumers of microcredentials. This slide is a visual description of the learning path. And this was how we really described for future skills and presented to the community what we meant by a PLAR-based micro-credential. So in all of our programs that run through community outreach and workforce development, there is an intake and a screening process. As Frank mentioned early on, there are certain intake criteria that we're looking for to especially assist people who meet certain priority areas. And that all occurs during the intake and screening and the presentation of the program and what the benefit is of the program to the individual. And then the next step was for those participants who were going to proceed to complete a PLAR assessment. And that PLAR assessment was essentially, can they be successful in completing the first of the micro-credentials? And if so, then they were able to then attempt the second assessment for the second of the micro-credentials. And if they were also then successful in that, they would proceed to the third. And when we talk about results, we'll show you what the outcomes of those PLAR assessments were. But what that really did at the very outset of the program was say to the individuals who were coming, again, really conscious of those equity and inclusion issues that we talked about before, we were able to say, the learning that you have previously is important and we recognize it and we give credit for it. And we're not going to ask you to repeat learning that you've already taken elsewhere, but we're going to position you at the place where is the most appropriate to begin. And we found that this was a really essential component and a very successful component of the overall program development. Next slide, Frank.
All right, so in terms of the MicroCourse structure, so I think I've alluded to previously that, you know, the DFW project or micro-credential stackable project, there's 3 micro-credentials in that, you know, in that micro-credential program. So one is called Essential Digital Skills for the Workforce 1. So that is the very first one, or, you know, what we call DFW 1 short term. And then Essential Digital Skills for the Workforce 2, which is DFW 2. And then the last one is Digital Fluency for the Workforce. And, you know, we've stick with this kind of like naming structure because what we found is, you know, is you need at least to complete all these 3 to be actually fluent for, to be digitally fluent. So when you do complete DFW 1, 2, and 3, then you'll have, you know, 3 micro-credentials, but the last one will be called Digital Fluency for the Workforce. Each of the micro-course is about 12 to 15 hours long. And what it includes is there are a lot, you know, there are online modules on Blackboard that they can access. With the synchronous component, there are also, you know, live sessions with the facilitator. Right now, you know, all through online, just through Blackboard online. And then there's also opportunity to connect with the facilitator through office hours whenever they need to. And then the last one is, you know, if they do have any questions, they can feel free to email their facilitators and their facilitators will be helping them answer any questions. So the main difference between the synchronous and the asynchronous is that the synchronous has that weekly live sessions that we encourage all learners to attend. The asynchronous part, there is no weekly live sessions. But, you know, for the most part, both of them are self-directed. So there is no, you know, week 1, you have to finish this modules 1 to 5, but it's basically up to them to, based on their schedule, to complete what they can. Because our, you know, because the people we're serving, you know, is different from your post-secondary, you know, typical post-secondary students. They do have a lot of, you know, other needs in terms of, you know, they do have, you know, childcare duties, family care duties. They are working part-time or and some are working full time. With the COVID-19 pandemic, some are also, taking care of their children at home. So we wanted it to be flexible and adaptive to what their, environment are in their daily lives. So that's why we chose, a self-directed approach for the micro-credential program. In terms of the curriculum, we identified, 6 cross-sectoral competencies, and these are based on curriculum consultations with our community industry partners, as well as, potential participants of the program. So people in the community, and then also, our library services at Humber, which Sarah will be talking about in a bit. But these are the 6, competencies that we came up with based on those consultations. So digital information management, data collection, interpretation, analysis, digital communication, ethics and security awareness, professionalism in digital spaces, and then digital problem solving. So just so for some examples in our modules, the data collection, interpretation, analysis, one of our module tasks asks our participants to look at data from Health Canada and kind of create like an infographic on Canva that summarizes this data in a visualized way. Some of our examples of digital communication is, we've taught them how to use LinkedIn in terms of networking, etc. And then in terms of, I think one of the things that we wanted to highlight is, the last module was actually all of the learners were tasked to create an e-portfolio, which basically integrates all of these 6 core competencies in a really nice, neat way, so that they can showcase all of their competencies that they learn throughout the micro-credential program in that one task, culminated task.
That kind of, sorry, can you just go back, Frank, for 1 second? Yep. That kind of acted like a summative assessment for the final micro-credential. I just want to point out too that these 6 competencies, it's noted in the heading of the slide that they dovetail with our Humber learning outcomes. And the Humber learning outcomes project is a project that was taken, it's been about 2.5 to 3 years actually, research across all of the industry and business partner associations at Humber, consultation with students, consultation with faculty, libraries, et cetera, to create a series of learning outcomes that are essentially the DNA of a Humber graduate. And digital fluency is one of those key mindsets. And these are the competencies that were broken down within that learning outcome. And we are working currently at Humber to align all of our curriculum to these Humber learning outcomes. And so this project, as a strategic project, kind of again brought together another essential component of the research that Humber was doing, the work with our industry partners, and was able to leverage that for this purpose as well. So that was sort of the theoretical description of what we were hoping to obtain and do. And then this is the how did we do it. So in a number of different sessions, we gathered enormous quantities of data about not just the workers themselves and what skills they needed, but we wanted the perspective of the participants, the community clients. We sought the internal contribution of others at Humber in our student success area, for example, certainly in community outreach and workforce development. And we invited our librarian and library partners to be a part of this as well. And you can see the number of sessions that were held. The majority was focusing on the industry partners. They represented many different sectors, and there were about 30 who took part in all. And that information from all of those sessions was synthesized and organized in a way that we could align to those Humber learning outcomes. There were a number of guiding inputs and questions that we used to inform those sessions, especially the industry partner sessions. And if you want to go to the next slide, Frank. Some of those questions were along these lines. So what does foundational digital fluency look like as a spectrum of skills based on your industry? And so this was open panel dialogue, small groups, and so on. How can digital fluency be learned, assessed, and demonstrated by a learner? A question that we would have posed to faculty and to some of our internal groups, but also on the job, how is digital fluency learned, assessed, and demonstrated in the workplace? And is it possible to build foundational digital learning, digital fluency training that can garner cross-sectoral backing? We had retail, we had customer service, we had some automotive and some other, fairly diverse industry partners. Is it possible to actually build foundational digital fluency skills that work across those sectors? And we had some information that some of that could be, and some of it had to be customized or could be future customized for more specialized training in each of those sectors. So this is just a snapshot of some of the types of questions. And then Frank, if you want to talk about the themes that emerged, I think you had that, yeah.
Sure. Yeah, so in terms of, the themes that emerged during those consultations, I think we had maybe 11 in total across, 70-ish participants. These are the themes that emerge in those conversations. So one is focus on, digital skills, which we've been alluding to a lot today. And then the other thing is soft skills. So a lot of industry, a lot of those consultations also focus on soft skills in terms of communication, professionalism, critical analysis, and that's what we have also integrated in our modules in the curriculum. Because these soft skills are valued by industry partners, and also they've indicated that some of the entry-level workers that they do hire are lacking soft skills that they would want to be incorporated in a course like this. Cross-sectoral digital tools, so tools that might be used for different sectors, and then sector-specific digital tools, which we didn't focus as much because those are very sector specific. So we focus on the first three, so the digital skills, the soft skills, and the digital tools. And
I think Frank, if just in the interest of time, we might need to just flip over to the results. So this sample slide will be in the deck, and you can have a look at a sample course structure, but we should skip over to results.
Yeah, so in terms of results so far, these are preliminary results. We're just in the process of analyzing all of our results. We've finished all three cohorts since December of last year. So right now we're in the deep research evaluation phase. But just wanted to showcase, the number of applications that we received, about 650, and then the number of enrolled students, which is about 315. Here are the demographics of our enrolled students based on that, 315 in terms of percentage. So 73% were women, 87% were racialized people, 13% were youth, 16% self-identified as having essential skills gap, 13 with disabilities, 24% newcomers, and then 74% first generation immigrants. In terms of who our learners are, at the onset, we wanted to have a 60-40 kind of like ratio in terms of synchronous and asynchronous. So we've achieved that here. So we had 62% in synchronous and 38% in asynchronous. in terms of their digital skills, 50% were confident of their digital skills when they first started the program. 29% were unsure, and 21% were not confident. So about half were either unsure or not confident about their digital skills. 88% believe that digital fluency skills are important for them to enter the workforce and for them to pursue their career goals. 90% believe that taking a micro-credential program from post-secondary institution like Humber is important to them. And the last one that I wanted to highlight here is 78% believe that taking a micro-credential program backed by industry partners is important to them. So I think for this one, it's quite interesting to see this number not as high as the first two, because potentially the learners do not see this as valuable, but in terms of the industry partners, they're the ones that will be looking at this credential and seeing what learning outcomes there are. So I think there is a bit of discrepancy there in terms of how we see industry partners as important compared to how the learners see them.
Although the percentage is relatively high, it's just not as high as the others.
Yes.
In terms of the results from PLAR, there were a couple of questions in the chat. So 31% were able to start at DFW 2. So in other words, they were successful in the first PLAR assessment. And then there were 6% who were able to start at the third level. And we found that when we did the pre-assessment, there were no participants who were able to be awarded the final digital fluency without some point of learning. But they all agreed, or very nearly all agreed, that PLAR made the program much more accessible, and 87% agreed that they were placed in the appropriate level. So even though there was some assessment of their own ability that may have been slightly misaligned, they were still in agreement that the placement was correct in the end. And then in terms of the actual micro-credential results, we did have an 84% completion rate overall for the first, and 78% for the second of all eligible participants. It's hard to say that. And 84% completed DFW 3. I saw in the chat there was a question about the fall off between those who began and we have normal attrition in programs. When we began the recruitment process, you always cast the net wide, and then it's a matter of determining who meets the criteria, who will be able to participate. And then there was this little thing about a global pandemic that happened in the middle of we began thinking about this project before COVID and had to change our strategy a little bit when the pandemic struck. So that certainly impacted some of the initial interest. You can see there was great feedback in terms of the value and support for the program. And I'm just conscious that we want to get to an opportunity for you to have some questions answered. So I think, Frank, we should pass through the testimonial slides and just go to the very last in terms of our challenges, what we've learned. And I think we can probably summarize, I won't read through this slide. There was initially confusion between digital literacy and fluency, and really what it meant for individuals to be taking this training. And that was a bit of a current that ran throughout the entire process of attracting people to the program and having them complete. We have been challenged in terms of measuring our outcomes, especially employment. We talked very briefly just as the meeting was opening about meeting the needs of workers who are already in work. And so we had expected that we were going to be able to have some measurement of resiliency, career resiliency. Was there progress in people's employment outcomes as a result of this? And we've had a little bit more difficulty than we were anticipating in even just meeting privacy requirements and having people report accurately to us what the outcomes for their employment have been. But it is something that we're working on because we know that it's such a critical factor and piece of what we are trying to measure. And the scalability of this project has been certainly something all the way along. We've known that when you're especially dealing with groups of marginalized individuals or people who need extra supports, whether they're extra learning supports or the wraparound supports that COWD is expert in delivering, the ability to do that over and over and to provide this degree of training in connection with other projects, we've encountered scaling challenges for sure with that. And I think that in terms of what we've learned, some of these things are tied to those challenges. We need to ensure that people understand upfront what the value of PLAR is and what exactly the outcomes we are anticipating will be so that people can see themselves in it and see the return on their investment of time and so on. We never felt that we had enough time for the development of curriculum. We're in a continuous improvement process for all of our curriculum development. And then just the last slide in terms of our next steps. As I said, we're working on project outcomes. We're working on knowledge dissemination. We are looking at scaling and we're looking at various ways of re-implementing the curriculum. I've mentioned a couple of times that we've had other projects that we've run. There was a ministry project called Rapid Skills that we had a cohort participating in. And as that cohort began, everyone said, it's too bad we didn't have them do DFW first, because that would have been a perfect lead in, especially as they began their training during the pandemic. So it just illustrates the importance of digital fluency, no matter whether you're trying to get a job or you're trying to reskill in a job or change your position within the company that you have.